With the Alien Romulus movie being out for a little bit now, I've been seeing a lot of discourse about this film. There's some who think there's too much fan service, some people who think there's not enough fan service, and some people who are generally just having a good time and not overthinking it. And honestly, I'm probably a little bit jealous of these people. I want to meet the film where it's at and review it as someone who's a newcomer to the franchise, who doesn't have a particular nostalgia for the Alien movies, and then try to answer the question, does Alien Romulus benefit from being part of the Alien franchise? So like I mentioned, I'm pretty new to the franchise. I've only recently seen the original Alien movie from 1980 and this one, so I don't yet have a mental model of what an Alien movie should be. But let's break it down into what it's trying to be. Alien Romulus is a 2024 film directed by Fede Alvarez that Wikipedia says is a science fiction thriller horror film. I'm going to be going over each of these genres one by one and giving my opinion on how Alien Romulus does at each genre and whether or not being part of the Alien franchise benefits it in this genre. I'm also going to try and keep it as spoiler free as I can, but heads up that there will be some spoilers. So for those of you who haven't seen the film yet or need a refresher, I'll give you a brief summary of the plot. Rain, Carradine, and Andy, who is a synthetic human, grow up and work on Jackson Star, a mining colony on the far reaches of space. After having her contract extended by the company she works for, Rain is forced to stay working for another 6 years on this hellish place. She connects with her ex-boyfriend Tyler and his crew and form a plan to get to Yavaga, a place that's supposed to be a paradise compared to Jackson Star. The plan is to go to a derelict spacecraft and retrieve stasis chambers, which will allow them to enter cytosleep and make the 9-year journey to reach Yavaga. They also need Andy, who is a synthetic human who can interact with the ship's onboard computer system. And then, as you can imagine, shit does not go according to plan, and the crew soon find themselves in danger and fighting for their lives. So, let's break it down genre by genre, starting with the thriller genre. I think that the soundtrack here is amazing. It's really the highlight of the film in my opinion. There are sounds of this distorted choral singing mixed with these heart-pounding percussion sounds that sound both human and foreign at the same time. These action sequences are also really fun. There's a lot of chase scenes and fight scenes that are filled with this bloody splattering and gore that look completely disgusting in like the best way possible and are really exciting to watch. When looking online, I find that this section of the movie is probably the most universally appraised, and I personally tend to agree. I think it's really well done. And honestly, I probably have the least to say about this genre. I think it's executed really well, and I think it doesn't matter whether it's part of the Alien franchise or not. I think Fede Alvarez does a great job of capturing the thrill and intensity of the situation. So that's the thriller genre. Now let's move on to the science fiction genre. And I think we can actually break this down into two parts, the world building and the social commentary. So starting with the world building, I think a lot of the world building is told to us rather than shown. Characters tend to bolt out tons of exposition, and some of it I find to be unnecessary. For example, there's a scene where they find a gun and one of the characters goes into great detail about like the make, the model, all the different parts of the gun, how the auto aim assist works, how many bullets the gun has. But it doesn't really do much. You could just told me, yeah, this is a space gun, and it would have done the exact same thing for me. The characters also have this goal of getting to Yavaga, this paradise world where you can see the sun. It's never really shown, it's only talked about in these highly vague terms. On top of that, all of the characters are on Jackson Star, which is told to us to be this dystopian world where everyone is depicted as living in slums and many people work dangerous jobs, but we never really get to see the reasons why this planet ended up being the way it is. And at first, I thought, maybe as a newcomer to the franchise that maybe this was just something that was mentioned in previous films, but no, this is the first time it makes an appearance. So it looks like it has the makings of a dystopian critique on capitalism, but I think it fails here because it never really tells us why something like this happened, whether it was the unrestrained, unregulated, like late-stage capitalism or something else that led to the world being this way. And maybe that's a nice transition to the second part, which is the social commentary aspect. There are a lot of concepts that are only very briefly touched upon that could be seen as social commentary. We already talked about this critique of capitalism, It gets expanded upon within the story about how a synthetic human had to kind of make a trolley problem type of decision, deciding whether one group or another group of humans would be killed while working in the mines. This then leads to one of the crew members aboard the ship, which once again is told to us rather than shown, to despise Andy, as his own mother was one of the miners that was killed in this incident. So there's also this kind of element of tension between humans and synthetic humans, and it could be viewed through the lens of like discrimination, maybe an allegory for racial discrimination. Andy himself speaks in kind of an unusual way, even for a synthetic human, and this is due to him suffering damage in his programming before being rescued by Rain's father. I wasn't sure whether the film was trying to make a commentary here on neurodivergence or something like that. So then, which of these is the central theme? Is it capitalism, racial tension, or neurodivergence? Well, I do think the movie is about all those things, but one thing that I didn't mention is that it's also a story about immigration. There's an interview that Alvarez gave with the show Crew Call, in which he said, "I hope people connect with it because it's such a third world story in a way. That's where I'm from. If you're born in the third world, that's your reality, for good, for bad. Particularly when you grow up. When you're in your 20s, it doesn't matter how much people can tell you, hey, it's a beautiful country, there's a lot of blessings here. You're gonna go, I want to go to New York, I want to go to London. Everyone wants to go where the center of the world is, whatever feels like is the center of the world. And the monster, usually, is everything that stops you from getting whatever you want to go. The monster, the alien, all the things you're gonna go through. That's why one of my favorite shots in this movie is when Rain sees the sun for a second and she covers her face. And that's what she wants. She wants to go to a place where the sun at least shines. While I can definitely get behind the meaning of the message, it definitely did not occur to me that that's what the director was trying to go for as I was watching this film. I think the problem here is that you're taking an already established entity of the xenomorph who through cultural association already has certain motifs and meanings tied not only to its character design, but the plot of other films in the Alien franchise. I feel that the central theme Fede Alvarez was trying for here is muddled. It's lost in the broader cultural context associated in the xenomorph. I also think that the other meanings are also lost because there are so many things going on at once. As such, that combined with what I feel is lackluster world building, I don't think this film succeeds particularly well either in the world building or in the social commentary. And I think the social commentary aspect is specifically hampered because it's tied to the Alien franchise. This just leaves us with the last genre of this film, which is horror, and let's just say I have some strong mixed feelings here. I will say the presentation of the horror elements is really well done. Many of the scenes in this film are not quite black and white, but black with like these piercing bursts of orange or red, so almost black and orange or black and red. Directors sometimes use these black and white color schemes to convey a sense of dread. I think it's done well here. The ship that the crew find themselves in is also full of these tight, cramped spaces that invoke a real feeling of claustrophobia. So all of the visual design, the set design, I think it's well done, but I have one major complaint. I think the scariest thing in the world is not one particular creature or entity, but the unknowable. It's the creature in our own subconscious that lurks in the shadows. By being able to see this creature, know how it operates, what it does, that takes away from some of the fear. The trailers for this film already clearly show the monsters without very much ambiguity. And hey, even if I had somehow managed to avoid seeing this trailer, which was playing non-stop at many of the movie screenings that I was attending at the time, I already knew what a xenomorph looked like. The original Alien movies came out so many years before I was born, so by the time I saw the original Alien movie, I had seen so many parodies and pop culture references to the xenomorph that I already knew everything there was to know about it. To be able to fight a creature, to be able to shoot it and make it bleed, even kill this creature, that's no longer scary. I'd liken it almost like to a game like Dead Space 2. When you start that game, you have no weapons and no way to fight back against the aliens. But by the time you're near the end of the game, you have so many weapons and gadgets that you're practically a walking Geneva Convention war crime. And that sense of fear and dread that was present at the beginning is never quite the same. In that sense, the things that make this film a fun thriller unfortunately work against it as a horror film. And because of that, I would say that this film doesn't succeed as a horror movie. But I'm not gonna say that. because I think it all changes in the last 20 minutes of the film. Without going into too specific detail, the entire tone of the film changes towards the end as we face a new, unforeseen, and unknowable threat. The heart-pounding soundtrack from before becomes silent, and it's almost as if the film has to stop for a second and say, wait, what the hell? What the fuck is happening? This wasn't part of the plan? And I think it's phenomenal. This is when the film truly shines, and the only part of the film where I was legitimately scared. I think Fede Alvarez here shows us that if he really wants to, he could scare the shit out of us. So to that end, I do think that this film ends up succeeding as a horror film, but only after it's able to free itself from the constraints of being what an alien movie entails. So, let's take it all back and let's recap for a bit. From a thriller perspective, I don't think this film is hurt by being part of the franchise, and if anything, the thriller aspect is kind of the highlight of the film. From a science fiction perspective, I think that things aren't really executed particularly well, and the film has too much cultural context and too many different meanings that muddle what it's trying to go for. And finally, from a horror perspective, I think it does eventually succeed, but only after it's able to break itself from its pre-existing conventions of an alien movie. Taking all of these things into consideration, I give the film a 7 out of 10. It's a good film, but in my opinion not a great one. I do think that if Fede Alvarez was able to make his own movie with no creative constraints and an original IP, it could have been a higher score easily. So, there we go. The movie's good, but it could have been better if it was not tied to this IP. But as you can probably see, we still have some remaining runtime on this video, and that's because I haven't actually answered our original question. The original question was, does Alien Romulus benefit from being part of the Alien franchise? And I actually think the answer to that is clear. The chance that this film would have been number 1 in the box office if it had not been part of this franchise is so much lower. If you don't believe me, or hey, you think I'm being cynical, here's a list of the top grossing films of this year. Everything that's marked with an asterisk is a film that's part of an existing IP. As you can see, as we climb higher and higher on this list, we see less and less original IPs, and once we crack the top 10, everything here is part of an existing IP. So in a weird, twisted sense, all the things I said previously in this video, it doesn't matter as much as the fact that it is part of this Alien franchise, and because of that, it definitely benefits. So what does that leave us with then? Well, I think as consumers, we have some freedom here. We control what we invest our time and attention in, and if we want to see movies that have less creative restrictions, I think that we should choose to occasionally take risks on new IPs and vary the types of films that we choose and watch to send a message to these studios that while some of these guaranteed franchise blockbuster films can be good if executed well, we also want to see the lower restrictions on creative freedom that come from working on something new. Thank you for taking the time to watch. If you saw this film, I'd love to know what you thought about it in the comments. If you liked what you saw and you want to see more movie reviews and commentaries, please go ahead and subscribe.